All right, I'm going to add my comment really quickly. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Post. Okay. Pin comment. All right, I was nervous about doing that. Hi, guys. All right, so let me add Victoria in. Let's see. Victoria, how are you guys doing? Let's see, there she is. Okay. We're waiting for Miss Victoria. Hi, guys. Thanks so much for coming.
Hi.
There she is. Hi.
Oh, hello. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So welcome everyone. We'll just go ahead and I guess get started, right? And people can.
Yeah, we're just diving in.
Yeah, I feel very powerful being on the VNN account right now. So
We have too much power. What should we do with it?
too much power. This password. Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm Alexandra. I am the author of Lore, which is the January book club selection for Barnes & Noble. I'm very proud of it. Here is the gorgeous Barnes & Noble Deluxe Edition. It comes with a special little annotated chapter at the back if you guys are interested. I think it's sold out online, but it should still be hopefully available in some Barnes & Noble locations. And today I have with me one of my really good friends, Miss Victoria Aveyard. Would you like to introduce yourself and also tell them about your current series, your upcoming book?
What's going on? What have we all been up to besides, just living? So I'm Victoria Aveyard. I am the author of the Red Queen series, which is a YA fantasy dystopia series. The last book in that came out 2 years ago, 1 year ago. Oh, time doesn't mean anything. Yeah. And then I have a brand new YA series starting in May called Groundbreaker. The first book is called Groundbreaker, and that is a YA fantasy adventure about a teenage girl who is a pirate's daughter, and all she wants to do is see the world, and her mother won't let her until an immortal and an assassin show up on her doorstep and say, "You have to save the world," and she's like, "Cool, let's go."
I mean, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't go on that journey, right?
Who wouldn't go on that? I had a lot of fun writing it. I'm sure you had a lot of fun writing Lore, and I'm really excited to hear about the whole process.
Yeah, one thing I love is that I know for you, Groundbreaker was kind of a dream book for you to be able to write, and Lore was definitely the same for me. I've really wanted to write a story that uses Greek mythology for years and years and years, and it just took a really long time to figure out, the right idea for it. So
Do you feel like, because Greek, your background is Greek, and you're like me, you definitely were one of those kids who grew up reading like Edith Hamilton and Delaire's Book of Greek Myths, and we were the Greek mythology kids growing up who are really dorky. Do you feel like you had other ideas and they weren't right, and like this was the right one? How did you know it was Lore?
Oh, that's a really good question. Actually, I'm gonna grab this because I have it on the counter.
Oh, good.
This is my Book of Greek Myths. It has seen better days.
Right over here. Oh God, I love it.
So my mom's side of the family, as Victoria said, her side of the family is Greek. And so as her way of starting to kind of like introduce this side of our heritage to us was to give me and my siblings this book. I think she forgot how like dark and twisted a lot of Greek mythology is, and maybe not totally child appropriate 100%. But I really fell in love with this world, and I thought it was so cool as a kid to even feel like very, 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 very distantly connected to this world of like heroes and gods and all of that. And so with Lore, I kind of knew I didn't want to do just a retelling of any one myth. I wanted to really try to figure out like what a modern myth might feel like. So kind of trying to capture the darkness, the like very bitter irony of a lot of the fate, the like workings of fate that you see in the myths. And I just wanted to explore even some of the problems that I had with these stories as a kid, which I know this is something we've talked about quite a bit. Obviously, there is quite a bit of sexual violence in the myths, but there's also just it's hard to kind of go back and read them now because you see how often like the women in these stories are punished for ambition or showing anger or showing jealousy, very human emotions. So I know that this was something you kind of felt too with Realmbreaker, right? Where you're not necessarily seeing yourself in these stories that you love. And, you know, in the myths, most women did not get to go out on these great adventures. As Lore out in Lore, you know, Athena never chose a woman to go out and have one of these grand monster slaying adventures. So do you want to talk a little bit with Realmbreaker, how like you kind of
I am like ready to geek out with you, and I'm thinking like, oh yeah, Ariadne got like so teed up because she tried to like take control of her own fate, and Athena had all that crap with Arachne, and it's just like, yeah, it's very anti-feminist, and Lore is incredibly feminist and has all of these great, strong female characters. So you kind of like, I want to talk about that so badly, but you're absolutely right. I feel like we as writers are always communicating to ourselves and who we were as teenagers, especially in YA, and the things that shaped us. And now that we're somewhat adults, I'm always hesitant to call myself an adult. You look back and you think, well, this thing was formative to me, but it was also missing this thing, or it was also debilitating in some way, or harmful to me, or harmful to an audience. And our way of advancing that is to change it or to make it a little bit more what we would have wanted and what we wish we saw, so maybe the next generation sees a little bit more. But that is how I came into Realmbreaker as well. Is I had those stories like Lord of the Rings that I loved, but they didn't love me, or they didn't have a place for me. And I'm happy that we're now in a place where we can communicate with that and recognize it too, because you can still love these things and cherish them, and also know like they made mistakes, and hopefully changes will be made in the future.
Yeah. I also love the image of you as a wee Victoria, you know, with your
same height
spring editions out, and like, you know, your Greek mythology books are stacked to the side. And I remember when I pitched this book to you originally, I still talk about, because, okay, so as a writer, sometimes you need like a quick elevator pitch, and it helps with marketing and publicity and that sort of a thing. And so I was really struggling to come up with what this pitch was going to be for Lore. And this is really when I had only written maybe like 100 pages of it, and I wanted to like pitch it to my publisher to see what they thought. And I was like, well, it's sort of like the Hunger Games meets like Percy Jackson, or it's maybe like a little bit of the Highlander. And Victoria was like, it's like Clash of the Titans meets the Highlander meets Tim Allen's The Santa Claus. And it makes me laugh every time.
A little bit, but that for anyone who's watching who is an aspiring writer, the idea of the elevator pitch is so important, to be able to tell someone in a sentence, not necessarily the whole story, but the gist of it, so they understand what they're getting when they pick up the book. That is a really valuable skill to have. And it could be as simple as that, as saying it's this meets this, and then the other person is like, I got it.
Do you have an elevator pitch worked out for Realmbreaker yet?
Oh, that one's tough, because and that is something I struggle with, and I'm like, you are messing up your own best advice. But mine would be, it's like if Lord of the Rings happened, but the Fellowship all got killed. Like, who's the JV team to saving the world? And that was the germination of the story for me, is who's the B team. And getting to do like the people who aren't heroes, who have to become heroes, blah, blah, blah. That was my fun time.
That's so fun to explore. And that's like one of the things that comes up in Lore too. It's like, what is a hero, and who actually has access to becoming a hero?
Right.
And so Lore really has to fight within this society she's grown up in. So Lore has been raised in this secret society, kind of, they are very cult-like, I will say that. But they are a secret society in our modern world of families who are descended from some of ancient Greece's greatest heroes, like Achilles, or in Lore's case, Perseus. And these families have this special task given to them by Zeus, and they are hunters. And what they hunt are gods. So every 7 years for 7 days, this hunt takes place, and 9 of the Greek gods, as punishment for trying to betray Zeus, are forced to walk the earth is mortal, and if you can kill a god, you can take that god's power and immortality. But then 7 years later, you become one of the hunted yourself. So kind of mixed bag there. But obviously, the idea of power and who gets to actually possess power is hugely important to the story, because Lore's society she's grown up in is very, how shall I put this? Very restrictive to young women, shall we say.
Patriarchal, maybe.
Patriarchal.
More patriarchal than the patriarchal society we currently live in.
Exactly. So I'm wondering, like, do you think about that when you're writing? Do you think about, I feel like it's hard as young women to like to that part of ourselves from the actual story, but it really is something I was thinking about a lot. And I was working on this story during when kind of Me Too was really entering the cultural conversation. We were having more honest conversations about it online. And I was really thinking about all the times as like a young woman, I had not held myself back, but I was always sort of modifying my behavior. I would never seem too angry or too ambitious, even just the weirdest things. Like, do you think about that still?
Yeah.
Think like, yeah.
Absolutely. And in Red Queen, I tried to go for more of an egalitarian society, especially with half the people who didn't have superpowers. But because on the superpower side of things, powers were inherited through the father, so it inherently made it more of a patriarchal society. That wasn't really something I could get around. But with the other half, I could, and I was really inspired by the way Battlestar Galactica treated the military and women. And I always love having that like complete egalitarianism in military structures, and that was always very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And then coming into Realmbreaker, I did something a little similar, whereas sort of the common folk and the lower classes aren't as restricted by gender roles and aren't as are built into a patriarchy. But then once you get to the upper echelons, again, I have a character who is a queen, and she is consistently like undermined or disbelieved or pushed to the side because she's a woman, and she's very, very acutely aware of that and how she can be this all-powerful person, but at the same time it's kind of built on sand because she's a woman. And a lot of her story is driven by the fact that she needs a guy to kind of be her shield, but then not also be a risk to her as well. And I love, there's been a lot of great think pieces about like, well, when you're writing fantasy and you're writing this royalty stuff, you don't have to do that. And I think I can only speak for myself, but it is almost hard to like hijack your brain out of thinking that way, because it's just so ingrained in us.
Yeah. No, it's wild how to like essentially deprogramming yourself, which is Lore has to deprogram herself from her upbringing too, and it's quite a struggle for her because she's been taught to only want certain things in life, including glory, which is not something we necessarily and you know,
but you're also deprogramming these great myths and stories, and for lack of a better word, IP that your audience is so aware of. Going into it, did you have like, well, I want to get this, I know you have certain gods who you get to talk, you get to sort of interact with and have, there's a twist with one of them that I freaking love. But and I want to know where that inspiration came from, because it's not necessarily something you would think, and something I always, because I you can tell I'm like fangirling right now, but it's always like Hades is the bad guy, and I was like, he gets a bad rap, okay? Other gods, just because he's the underworld god doesn't mean he's the worst one. But anyway,
I know like the chillest of the gods. He mostly trouble. It's just like, you guys do you on Mount Olympus. I will just
I'm rich and happy down here.
Yeah, exactly. So in lore, as I said, like 9 of the Greek gods are basically, they were rebelling against Zeus's wishes to essentially allow themselves to fade away from prominence and kind of retire to this godly realm where other gods from other pantheons are there. And so obviously many of these gods were like, we're not about to give up this power and prominence. So they tried everything essentially and ended up killing a ton of people. And so Zeus, one of the things I love about Greek mythology is that, this is like a dark thing to love about Greek mythology, but the punishments in Greek mythology often do sort of fit the crime. Like they're kind of overreactions, but there's like a dark irony to them a little bit. And so my thought was Zeus would totally punish them by making them mortal so they get to experience that mortality and what it's like to not necessarily be completely in control of your existence. And so I had a lot of fun picking which gods I thought would actually participate in this sort of rebellion. And Hades and Persephone are not one of them. They're busy. They'll be busy forever. They want nothing to do with these shenanigans. But yeah, I loved writing. There are 3 original gods left by the time the story takes place. And I loved writing each of them because they were so different, and trying to imagine, like, if you've been hunted for over 1,000 years, like, what does that do to you? And even though the gods have human emotions, they aren't human. And where that twist came from, like, if you boil these gods down to their essences, like, what are they like and what are they willing to do in order to survive? So yeah, the gods, Artemis is one of the gods featured in the book, and I think she was my favorite.
Well, growing up, you were either like an Aphrodite girl, an Athena girl, or an Artemis girl. And I think us Artemis girls were like, we're different.
You know, I was actually very much an Athena girl. And then as I got older, I like had this discomfort with her. And it wasn't until I got to college and my college professor pointed out that Athena is basically a tool of the patriarchy.
Yes!
Yeah, so Athena was really, it's interesting how her story and her image kind of evolves over like life in ancient Greece. Yeah. And these myths were meant to kind of explain the world, but also justify the way that their society and was organized and their rituals and their religious practices. And so it's interesting to kind of take a step back from the myths and analyze why certain stories are told certain ways. And I think with Athena, you know, what she came to represent and was not something that was like ever available to women in that time. So that's something I enjoyed confronting in the book for sure.
That is so, we could do this all night.
Yeah.
But people are not here to listen to us just be like, what's your favorite Greek myth? But like, what's your favorite Greek myth? I can't see the chat. I know you can. I don't know if there's questions you want to dive into, but like, I do want to know what your favorite Greek myth is.
I would also like to add that I am now an Artemis girl, because what sounds better than just running in the wilderness with like your girl?
Yeah, with your gals and a moon on your head and like maybe you're nude. It's fine.
All right. Okay. So I am going to scroll through the questions. If you guys want to leave them there, it's usually a little easier for me to find them rather than in the comments of the chat. Oh, the chat goes by so fast for us.
Yes.
Oh, there were some wonderful questions. Thank you guys so much. A couple of people have asked, is Lore standalone? Lore is standalone. I don't have any plans for a continuation. I would love to maybe write some short stories or novellas set in the world, but just standalone. Okay. Well, here's a good one. Is there a romance in Lore and Realmbreaker? Do you want to take it?
Yeah, so Realmbreaker is much more slow burn than Red Queen. There definitely is attraction. I love a slow burn. I love like a painful slow burn. So that's where I'm at. And I also got to do something in Realmbreaker that I really wanted to do in Red Queen, but couldn't because it didn't make sense for the characters. So this time around, I do have a villain romance, and I'm really having fun with it.
About this, I'm so excited to read it just because I'm like, oh, we're going to give some screen villains. We're going to like, yeah, I'm super pumped.
I love a villain power couple. Like, I'm all for, like, you guys are evil and you know it and you've got each other's backs.
And I'm sure they wear very fabulous clothing and they have like smoldering gazes towards one another, but also they're like,
and like one of them maybe is possessed by a demon, but like, that's okay.
Oh, Victoria.
What about you? What about Lore? What's going on?
Yes, there's romance in Lore. I think it's pretty sweet. It's, you know, now I want to write a villain romance. Discuss this, but this is more of like a childhood best friends to oh, we've met again now when we're 17, and wow, you are very attractive, and of all these complex feelings, kind of a relationship.
And we're also like running for our lives, like
Yeah.
all the time.
What bonds you more than danger?
It is cool that this book is over such a condensed time period too.
Yes.
And you haven't really written something like that where it's like it's a week.
No, and it honestly was, I will say it's always, figuring out the timeline of a book is always a challenge. Pro tip is to just create a calendar for yourself, like what's happening on each day. Did you do that for Realmbreaker? Because it's like,
I started and then it really fell off.
it's very,
and I'm like, oh, I need to like invent a new calendar system. I can't just be like September.
oh, I forgot about that. Oh, you don't want to develop a calendar system?
There was one line in the book where they were like, oh, that happened in September. And my friend who was reading it was like, they have September? They have, right? What? And I was like, yeah, in Lord of the Rings, they have that. I guess I'll take it out.
Delete. Yeah, Lore's over a week. It's, I think, 8 days total. And it was really interesting as a challenge to write, because then you have to get down like hour by hour. And also it's set in modern day New York City. And so I know from having lived in New York that like about how long it takes you to get places if you're walking or if you're, So it was interesting to try to time everything out by the hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was no like, we're up here and then 10 minutes later we're at Ellis Island.
Exactly. Okay. Oh, Victoria, I think you're going to like this question.
Ooh.
Who is your favorite Lord of the Rings character? That was a question for
That's a good question. And I'm running through quite a few in my head. I do love Galadriel. And I think she has a really great storyline, you know, coming across and being a bit of a villain herself and then redeeming herself and saying no to the ring and taking that much on. Yeah, I would say Galadriel. I have to pick a girl because, like, I'm so starved for women in those books.
Oh, I still think Eowyn's I Am No Man line is like the best in the whole series.
But I still get annoyed because then she goes to the House of the Healing and is such a mope, and the only thing that breaks her out of it is Faramir being like, I love you, let's get married. And she's like, I'm cured.
Love. You can tell this book was written by a man.
Yes.
I also Frodo. Honestly, the line that kind of makes me cry is when he's like, I'll take the ring, but I go the way. I'm like, Frodo.
Yeah. Frodo in the books is so much better than Frodo in the movies. And I think it really suffers because Frodo in the movies is like the boring scenes and there's no comparison to like, you cut away from Helm's Deep to Frodo and you're like, whatever, this guy. But in the books, he has such moving passages and he is like the total epitome of heroism and strength in a place where you wouldn't find it. So, and then you just got Elijah Wood's big blue eyes.
Really, like everybody in the films, it's like, yes, like completely buy that you exist in this fantasy world.
No one has brown eyes. I realized this as I was watching it, and I was like, this is erasure.
Well, also,
we can go on journeys.
Okay, we're getting into the weeds here, but I feel like we have to. So,
sorry.
Orlando Bloom had.
So when he had brown eyes, it's because he forgot to put in his contacts that day.
Okay.
And he would forget because he hated them. For more Lord of the Rings tips.
Okay, I saw a great question. Where did it go? Okay, do you have a favorite line or quote from Lore and Realmbreaker? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of one that's not spoilery, because Athena, I think, oftentimes the best lines in the book, like, because I couldn't resist. Mm-hmm. One I love is from the end of the book, and it's kind of a pivotal scene, so I won't say it. But I think one I still really like, which kind of gets at the theme of the book, is a feather fallen from the wing is not lost but free.
I love that line.
Yeah.
So I remember reading it and being like, Alex, you're good at this.
Thank you. Hey, how's the reception? Are you seeing me okay?
It's come in and out a little bit.
Okay.
But I'm getting by fine.
You guys let it get very wonky in terms of...
Please.
Oh yeah, my
Groundbreaker line, I'm thinking, I made a document of them so we could make graphics. When I just post the one that's fresh in my mind, because I just posted it today, but it's only men can speak all day long and still think themselves silent. I had some angry feminist lines in this book.
I approve. Okay.
And I got one F-bomb in it too. I felt very proud of my one F-bomb.
Oh, it always feels good.
The PG-13 one.
All right, let's see. Someone is asking if we've watched Bridgerton. Of course we have, but that's for another time. Let's see. Let me scroll down. Oh, you know what? We never answered what our favorite myths are.
Oh, yes.
Ask that. Do you want to go?
I love Artemis and Orion, not so much because of the way it ends, but I love that Orion is then hung in the stars because Apollo feels bad about what happened.
Oh, yeah.
And is always chasing the horizon, essentially.
Yeah.
That I quite liked.
That's so romantic.
And you know what? I was thinking, like, what are my favorite female-oriented ones? And I'm going through Delaire's in my head, and there aren't many.
No, there are a lot of real weird ones, to put it nicely.
They never mentioned that, like, Hercules killed all his kids or something.
No. Consider Daphne, who rather would be a tree than be with Apollo. Yeah. I still really love Theseus in the Labyrinth. I think that's still one of my favorite myths. And I do love Prometheus. Thanks for doing a solid Prometheus.
Thanks, Dan.
I think interesting ones, and yet like a lot of them are morally gray, which is like the wonderful thing about Greek mythology in general, is that it doesn't exist in this kind of, you know, simple scale of morality. So it's always very it gives you something to really think about.
I think Persephone Hades too, I'm really happy that there's been like more reflection on that love story essentially, and a little bit more nuance to what it was, and that gives her a lot more agency. And I remember in the Edith Hamilton book, the thing that I latched onto the most, and this was so like 9-year-old Victoria, was the description of the thrones of the different gods and how precise they were. And it was like Poseidon's was made of sea stone and coral and barnacles, and I was like, I want to design thrones.
I just got distracted for a second. I was listening, but I also got distracted by a question I know you will love. So thank you to the person who sent it in. Someone asked if Lore was a real housewife, what would her tagline be? I really want you to do this for Realmbreaker too. But like, I really think Lore's would be something like, my name is already legend or something. I'm not.
Oh, I love that. That is so good. Oh my God, I might have to.
Very young Lore declares, my name will be legend. Perhaps a play on words for the name Lore.
You froze. Are we good? Yeah. So I think
sorry guys,
it's mine too. I think it's both of us. But for Realmbreaker, it would be, we might not be good enough, but we might be bad enough.
I love it.
Yeah.
Sorry guys, I forgot to turn off my screen time notification, and they're like, your time on your social media apps is up. Perfect time, as always.
God, I don't want to see my social media or like screen time stuff for the pandemic, because it's just,
yeah.
I've been moved.
All right, let's see. Thank you for that question. That was amazing. Okay, got any tips for teenage aspiring authors? I've got no idea where to go with this call to writing. We were both teen writers, so I feel like this is a great question.
You're in good company.
We both wrote a lot of fan fiction, so I really admire you if you are working on your own stories at a younger age, because it takes a lot of bravery even just to try and to start. Do you have any?
Yeah, that was absolutely my struggle, was getting the confidence to show other people my writing, and that's what fan fiction did for me beyond just getting feedback in general and figuring out what I was good at. It was getting that courage. So if you're already there, like you're way ahead of where I was as a teenager.
Yes.
And I will say just in general, you're ahead of the game knowing you want to write, but please don't put pressure on your book because I feel like that'll take the joy out. And I think you should always recognize that no matter, you know, you could write something and it goes nowhere. Don't be discouraged by that because every word you write is another step into you being a better writer. So it's always worth something.
Yeah, it's so hard because, you know, even now I have to constantly remind myself that first drafts are allowed to be bad. They're allowed to, like, you know, a lot of the times I think we put so much pressure on ourselves as writers to be perfect right from the start. And really, I think people really greatly underestimate how much work and heavy lifting goes into actually editing and revising the books. That's really where they tend to take shape. And so I think as long as you are, you know, not putting a ton of pressure on yourself to be published as soon as possible, you're just like just like enjoying yourself and really discovering the kinds of stories you want to tell. And, you know, I think you're, like Victoria said, you're already so ahead of the game. And if you can find someone you trust to give you feedback on it, I think that is great.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And don't feel like you have to study creative writing or go to college or do something. Every path is so different. So don't like say, oh, this author did this, so I have to do that. It is so specific to you.
All right. Yes. Perfectly said. Let's see. Oh, we have quite a few questions about if Groundbreaker will have a Barnes and Noble edition. Which, oh well. But tell us about
we are in talks for that right now. I want to say yes, like we haven't nailed down what it is, but yes, there will be a special Barnes & Noble situation, and we're doing signed copies for Barnes & Noble as well as some other stores, so that's very exciting. We love Barnes & Noble, even though they wouldn't hire me when I was a teenager.
Sorry to Victoria's publisher, I just committed you to a Barnes & Noble edition. Let's see. What's your favorite part of writing a novel? My phone is trying
besides
to.
the map.
Victoria,
I love a map.
do you have a galley of Groundbreaker that you can like give them a sneak peek? Is like the black and white edition in there?
Yes, it actually is in the ARC, which is very rare. I think we got it in there, and I'm really happy about that. And it's a lot. It's a lot. The artist we got was so detailed and so precise, and there was so much on the map that I was like, I don't know if she's gonna be able to do this, and then she just knocked it out of the park beautifully.
That is a beautiful. Lore does actually. So you guys, Lore has a map too of New York City. It shows you all of their locations that they go to in the book, in case you've never been to Manhattan and can't quite visualize where everything is. It was really fun to put that map together. So.
Next year, there should be a Lore tour where you take us on a walking tour of Manhattan and we can go to all the locations.
I'm not going to lie. This was something I really wanted to do last year. I was planning on flying to New York in like April, and then we had the pandemic, so that did not. Eventually, I would love to do that. Okay, here's a wonderful question. Growing up, did you have a strong feminine role model? How did they shape your current feminist views?
Princess Leia. I really respected my mom, and in hindsight, I really respected having a working mother. I remember when I was younger, kind of being annoyed that like I was the only kid who had to get on the bus because my mom wasn't picking me up from school. And now in hindsight, it's like, no, that was a good thing for me to see. I think she very much a formative influence on me and my life. And it was a really formative influence on my dad and my brother too, because otherwise it would be very patriarchal.
Yeah, I mean, definitely my mom for sure too. I think we both grew up very close to our moms. It's so funny that you said that because I feel like Princess Leia is sort of, for people our age, we're in our 30s, Princess Leia was like a very early feminist role model for a lot of young women, including us. And I just love her. And Carrie Fisher too is a fantastic role model. God love her.
Yeah, Princess Leia and Mulan were my two growing up. And I think it was, and this is so ridiculous, but when I was a kid, I like didn't like blonde princesses because it made me feel ugly for not being blonde and being so like dark and hairy. So then like brunette heroes like Belle and Princess Leia, and then having Mulan, I was like, you don't make me feel ugly.
I will say it is, as a brunette as well, it is very like, you will take whatever brunette hero you can get.
Yep. Brunette representation. My God.
Oh, here's one. Do you ever want to change book ideas when you have committed to writing one? Yes. It is always more fun to write the book that you are not supposed to be working on and have
Absolutely.
zero to.
It's like the wife and the mistress. That's how I feel, is, you know, the book you're working on is the wife, and the one that's like, hey, come look at me. It's the mistress. And you can't. Not just because, like, you shouldn't, but you love your wife. And we have deadlines and contracts, and that does make it a lot easier motivation-wise, I sometimes find.
Yes. Okay. I love this one from Maeve Calhoun. I feel like this might be a reference to Red Queen, perhaps. Would the characters from Lore and Realmbreaker get along, or would they kill each other? I think that they would actually get along. From what I've read,
I don't know about Athena.
Yeah. Athena likes no one except for Miles in the book, Lore's human friend. She basically likes.
Athena and Sarasa are very similar in that they're like all business strategy gals, and I think they'd try to outplay each other, and that would result in a lot of friction. I think Athena would use the shit out of Democrion, the really dumb immortal, who is also incredibly strong and skilled as a warrior. He would definitely be her hammer.
Yes, I concur. I absolutely agree with that. All right. We're getting low on time, but if you guys have any last questions you want to submit, go for it. I will continue to scroll and look for one. Oh, Victoria, what book are you reading right now? I actually have the book I'm reading right now, and I'm going to balance my phone so it doesn't go flying. I'm reading 2 books. I have them on the counter because I thought it would be fun to show you. These are the 2 I'm reading.
Oh, lovely. Oh, yes, JL, that just made the bestseller list this week.
Yeah. Also the Barnes & Noble February pick.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Oh, that's awesome.
February pick is what I meant to say. And also Kingdom of the Wicked, which has been recommended to me many times.
Oh, that's great. Well, I just finished this one, and I was reading How Much of These Hills is Gold before, and now I'm going to be reading A Song of Race and Ruin by Roseanne Brown.
Oh, that sounds, you know what? I have read that, and it's amazing. It's a really, what I really love about that book is how storytelling is utilized in it. And it's fabulous. And the story moves really, and the characters are so interesting. You're going to love it. Okay, let's see. I
had a hard time reading in this past year, but this is like, I'm greasing the gears. I'm slowly getting back into it. I read like 2 books last year. It was horrible. I think I blame the pandemic.
Someone just asked, did Athena actually like Miles? In as much as Athena can like any mortal, she does like Miles.
That was a good question.
I would say, because she, her tolerance is pretty low.
Same.
Oh, you know what? I think this is a great question for both of us, because you are kind of like famous for your plot twists. The one I remember reading Red Queen and like putting the book down when I hit the big one, and I was like, Aveyard, and I didn't even know you at the so that was extra weird.
That's what I'm always going for. I always want you to throw the book against the wall, because that has been done to me, and I need to pass the pain along.
So the question is, do you typically think of plot twists first, or do they happen as you're writing?
I usually have the basic skeleton of the plot in my brain, especially Act 1 and Act 3, when I go into a story. So for the Red Queen twist, yes, that was always, always, always there. And sort of my carrot to help me get through that first draft is knowing I was going to get to write that scene. And then in Realmbreaker, I'm really happy that the early reviews, people are all like, oh shit, that twist. And that's more in the middle. And I'm glad that it's landing the way it's landing. But yeah, that was also part of the original plot line.
Lore has a couple big plot twists in it. We don't spoil it if you've read it in the comments, please. Don't spoil them. Spare the readers who have not yet gotten to it. And actually, the plot twist that comes about, well, I don't really want to prep you for it, but like the biggest plot twist of the book, which I say, you know, how do I want to put this? Well, you can ask me about it later.
I agree though, because when people ask, they do ask now, like, are there any twists in it? And part of me wants to be like, no, there's no twists at all. It's just straight. And then that will get you even more.
So there is a really big twist in the book. It's the one that Victoria referenced kind of towards the beginning of our chat. And I think of it as like the real twist of the book, because the first one is kind of meant to trick you into thinking that's the really big plot twist, but there's some other one, and that's important. But that was actually the first thing I thought of in this story, was this plot twist. And so for the first time ever, I basically had to kind of construct the story around this plot twist. And I think that's why I had more, it took a really long time to edit the book and figure out the characters and all of that.
It is interesting too, because when you're writing to the twist, other things can fall to the wayside, and you build the twist up really, really well, but other things are kind of, we need to fix those.
Because it does take a lot of work, and it's visible work to the reader. You don't necessarily see it right away. Oh no, someone just asked, wait, no plot twists in Groundbreaker? No. There's like at least
no, there's none. There's none no plot twists whatsoever.
Forget everything I just said. None at all. So we're almost out of time, but I thought this was a great question to end on, which someone asked, what is something I would like readers to take away from Lore? And I would love for you to answer this too about Groundbreaker. Like, what's your hope that they, you know, that they take away from the story? And for Lore, it really is the theme of the book. It's something that Miles says to Lore very early on in the story, which is essentially that you have to address your past and you have to confront your past if you ever want to move forward with your life and have that happy future that you want. And I think the story also kind of plays around with that idea on a bigger scale too. You have to really confront the things in the legends that you believe in this like history that you know. You have to confront what's in the past and really interrogate it in order to be able to move forward and have a better future.
Yeah, that basically that healing your own trauma is very well done. For Realmbreaker, I think it comes back to, you know, no matter who you are, everyone can be a hero and everyone deserves an adventure.
Yeah.
That's very much where I was coming from.
I kind of like that too. Lore, you know.
Yeah, Lore is very similar.
Yeah, Lore really wants to be a hero. That's why she declares, my name will be legend, because there's this idea in her society of like the greatest glory you can achieve is essentially being remembered and having tales spoken about you, and that's its own kind of immortality. And Lore is just denied this within her society, and so she really has to fight for it. And one thing I love about the story is that Lore is able to become a hero on her own terms. She's not like her ancestor Perseus. She's not like any other hero in Greek mythology. She is the hero she wants to be, and she kind of claims that for herself.
Yeah, and that's so deeply baked in that Greek inspiration, especially because you have all these heroes who are known, but they had to ruin their own lives to do it, or like die, or it's at you. Just you speaking, I'm thinking like I hear Troy or like the Iliad in my head talking about how these names will echo forever, or being told like you can stay here and have a true love and have a family, but you're going to be forgotten, or you can go to Troy and die and your name will live forever. And she gets to have both, baby.
Exactly. So thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.
I just want to remind you that if you'd like to order Lore, it is available 24/7 on barnesandnoble.com. You can also pre-order Realmbreaker, which comes on May 4th.
Yeah.
Thank you guys again so much.
Thanks,
you can
Alex.
if you have any other questions. So have a great rest of your night.
You too.